Family farms are still here. In many places, the land is still owned by local families, but control over how that land is used is changing. Across rural America, farmland is no longer just farmland. It's becoming energy space, infrastructure space, and development-ready space. And the people shaping those decisions are often not the ones who live there, farm there, or raise families there. At today's prices, farmland doesn't need to be sold to be removed from agriculture. It only needs to be leased, or crossed by a pipeline, or connected to power and water in ways that permanently change what it can support. What matters now isn't just who owns the land, but who controls what happens on it, who benefits from that control, and what it means for rural communities long term. I'm Rowan, and this is OTRA Legends. What changed my understanding wasn't watching farms disappear. It was realizing how little actually had to change for control to shift. A farm just up the road didn't fail. The family didn't sell. The deed stayed local. But farming stopped. And once it did, decisions about that land stopped following planting seasons and started following contracts. That pattern is repeating across Ohio.
Size solar farm. I want you to take a look at some of the video that we have of that farm. You can see it stretching for quite some time. But what we know is that one of the concerns that some residents have is that more solar farms could begin popping up throughout Tate Township. And at tonight's Board of Trustees meeting, residents claimed that they had no idea this farm was going to be popping up.
In Bethel, Ohio, residents packed meetings, raised concerns, and fought a proposed solar project that would permanently change farmland in their community. Despite the opposition, the project moved forward. The land didn't leave local hands, but the decision about how it would be used no longer belonged to the people who lived there. That's the part we tend to miss. Farmland doesn't have to be sold to stop functioning as farmland. It only has to enter an agreement that decides its use for decades. As farmers reach retirement age, the question isn't always who will buy the land. More often, it's who will control it next. Long-term leases, easements, and infrastructure agreements quietly lock in land use while ownership stays the same. The name on the deed doesn't change. The future of the land does. Utility-scale solar is one of the clearest examples of how control over farmland shifts without a change in ownership. Across rural Ohio, farmland isn't always sold. More often, it's leased. Long-term agreements, typically 25 to 40 years, sometimes longer with extensions, decide how land can be used for most of a generation.
Reporter Sean Delancey joined a heated meeting with regulators who could give the project the green light to move forward. He brings us more.
The Williamsburg High Theater was packed to the brim for a hearing by the Ohio Power Siting Board,
considering approval of a sizable 1,200-acre, 100-megawatt solar farm on what's now corn and soybean fields just outside of town along Sharp's Cutoff Road.
Signs like these are scattered around Claremont County by folks who don't think that solar panels belong on what they consider pristine and naturally beautiful farmland.
People like Becky Johnson.
I'm seventh generation farming.
Her passionate speech about how solar projects would be covering up fertile farmland.
This is where control quietly becomes permanent. Land under a long-term energy lease is no longer valued as farmland. It's valued based on contracted revenue. That changes who can buy it, how it can be financed, and what it's ultimately worth. And when the leaseholder later approaches the family with an offer to purchase the land outright, the balance of power is already set. The buyer already controls the land's use. They already operate the infrastructure. They already understand its long-term value. What began as a way to stabilize one generation quietly limits what the next generation can do. Ownership can be inherited. Control often cannot. Solar installations don't exist in isolation. They require grid access, transmission upgrades, and reliable backup power. That's where natural gas infrastructure enters the story. In Claremont County, a new natural gas pipeline was installed directly behind residential neighborhoods, cutting through farmland and wooded areas. Large sections of mature trees were cleared. The land was permanently altered. Similar pipeline expansions have occurred in Hamilton County, where a proposed data center is already facing public resistance from residents concerned about energy use, infrastructure strain, and long-term impact. Pipelines are not built for farms or neighborhoods. They serve regional and industrial demand. Once installed, they remain for decades, regardless of how surrounding land is used. When pipelines, transmission lines, and substations appear together, the land becomes energy capable. And once land reaches that stage, it enters a different category entirely. This doesn't mean a specific project was planned from the beginning. It means the conditions for energy-intensive development now exist. Infrastructure doesn't follow development. Development follows infrastructure. For years, Ohio actively courted large-scale energy and data infrastructure. State leaders offered tax incentives, streamlined approvals, and long-term abatements. The goal was growth. But something has shifted. Across Ohio, township meetings that once drew a handful of residents are now standing room only. The moment a data center is mentioned, communities show up. Not because they oppose technology, but because they're beginning to understand what control actually looks like. Recent reporting shows that Ohio is now one of the top states in the country for data centers, with more than 200 facilities already operating. These buildings can require as much electricity as a small city in place, long-term demands on water systems, and transmission infrastructure. What communities are pushing back against isn't just the building, it's the structure of the deal. Residents begin asking a simple question: who is carrying the cost? Many data centers receive long-term tax abatements, sometimes lasting a decade or more. During that time, local police, fire departments, and infrastructure still serve the facility, but property taxes may not flow back to the community right away. Electric utilities, meanwhile, are investing billions in transmission upgrades to support this demand. Those costs don't disappear. They are passed on to ratepayers across the region, whether a data center is built in their township or not. This is where control becomes visible. Once land is zoned, powered, pipelined, and permitted for energy-intensive use, the negotiation shifts. Communities are no longer deciding whether they want a project. They're deciding how much impact they can absorb from a project that is already positioned to happen somewhere nearby. And in several Ohio townships, residents have begun using the only leverage they still have: moratoriums, referendums, and public pressure. Not to stop growth entirely, but to slow it long enough to understand the consequences. This isn't about conspiracy or secrecy. It's about timing. Decisions made quietly at the infrastructure stage often determine outcomes long before the public hears the word data center. By the time the proposal becomes visible, much of the control has already shifted. If the biggest decisions are already made before the public meeting, what does local control actually mean anymore? Solar leases, pipeline easements, transmission upgrades, and industrial zoning all have one thing in common. They don't require land ownership, but they determine land use for decades. Energy developers benefit from long-term contracts. Utilities benefit from expanded capacity. Industrial users benefit from predictable access to power and water. Farmers do not operate in that system. What we're watching is farmland being repurposed through control rather than ownership. Long-term leases and infrastructure decisions quietly determine what rural land becomes for generations. These choices don't make headlines. They happen one agreement at a time. This is history forming in real time, not through a single project, but through many quiet decisions layered over decades. So the question going forward is this: if the land where you live is still owned locally, but no longer used locally, who is really shaping its future? And once control shifts, does it ever come back? I'm Rowan, and this is OTRA Legends. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy hunting.